if you thought of being thankful for what you don't have? I visited one of our elderly members, and I asked her if she lived alone. She said, no, Arthur and Ben live with me. And she said, arthritis and Ben gay. What are you thankful that you don't have?
More kids.
You better not say that.
Somebody asked Kevin if his wife go with he and his daughters to the football game, and he says, no, and we're all happier that way.
Bad health. You want good health, but you don't
Yeah, you
have
don't.
bad health.
Ebola.
Yeah.
Yeah.
An Aggie degree.
And no one in particular.
Did you really say that? Yes, sir.
Or being a Democrat.
Or being
I can tell a good story about that one.
So, it seems to me, and maybe this isn't true, but Thanksgiving, especially if you sit down at a Thanksgiving meal, you think of what you have. It's also good to be thankful for what you don't have. If it went a bit further, thankful for what we have that others don't have. And when you started sharing your story, you know, to think of, we don't have to live in a country where literally fearing for safety and things like that. How does it help in our Thanksgiving to think of what we have that others don't have? I mean, a meal, roof over our head, family, united, yeah, boy.
Opportunities.
Yeah. Awesome. Isn't that something to think that we do have opportunities and some people don't feel that way about their life? What about being thankful for what we don't have that others do have? You know, one of our preschool teachers, I didn't know till today, I'm not sure what her ethnic background is, but her early years were in West Africa. And you realize that people live in West Africa, that they're not able to say we don't have Ebola. It's a very real thing. There's a story in the Bible of two people who go to pray, and one is a self-righteous person, and the other recognizes how broken they are. And the self-righteous person begins their prayer by saying, God, I thank you that I'm not like this other person. So my thought is, there's some things that aren't good Thanksgiving. It's not good for our thanks to be at the cost of other people, to look at someone and say, I think that I'm not like them. If our Thanksgiving elevates us at the cost of other people, I don't think that's a good way to do it. In fact, I think good Thanksgiving comes out of humility. Just recognizing that life is a gift. And from my perspective as a Christian, and I want to leave the room open. I don't know what everybody's faith background is, so that's my perspective. Life is a gift, and I believe there's a giver. One who gives us that gift. And so Thanksgiving is giving thanks to God. And I'm hoping to just stir some thoughts about Thanksgiving because it's such a wonderful topic. Anita is an incredible blessing to my life, teaching one of our children, but also the work she did at this elementary school that we had a partnership with is unbelievable, the lives that were changed. And one of the men from our church that she worked with, his name was Tom Potts. And Tom unfortunately just passed away this last year, but he wrote a memoir of his own life. And so I'm going to share a story of Thanksgiving that initially you'll think, where would the thanks be in it? But the timing of this story and what we've just been through as a nation yesterday. So Tom was in the military in World War II. He enlisted. And he's recalling the day that he was at his post, and they shared a telegram that his parents had received that his brother who was overseas had died in battle. So Tom's about 19 years old, he's in the military, and he gets word that his brother has died in battle. The Navy provided no special means to cope with grief. Since it was Sunday, we had some time off, and he said, I told my buddy, Ronald Mergenthaler, and guess what Ron did? He stayed with me for the day. So Tom finds out his brother dies, he tells his friend Ron, and Ron stays with him for the whole day. Years later, when Tom would be asked about things he gave thanks for, he would mention Ron, who heard about his need. Ron didn't have any training in counseling or anything else, but he spent the day with him, just so that Tom wouldn't be alone in his grief. So I met Carl 19 years ago. We were out walking. And,
No, you were running, you were gliding across, I was walking.
and I found out, well, I found out later, but Carl is a man of his word. So we're out taking a walk together, and I introduced myself, and somehow he finds out that I'm a Presbyterian pastor, and Carl said, well, I'm a member of a Presbyterian church, and he named the church where he was a member. He said, I'm going to come hear you preach someday. That was in 1995, Christmas Eve of 2013. Just a day or two later, I look out at the church, and there's Carl, keeping his word. He came to church.
I told Stephanie Lynn, I said, watch Wayne's mouth.
We're afraid you're going to have a heart attack.
You know it's a big deal when the preacher is speechless.
A few Sundays ago, Wayne was in the middle of his sermon, and his wife and son show up. Julie shows up, and Wayne was speechless.
I was speechless.
She was in town an hour or 2 hours early, and he wasn't expecting her, and he just went, oh.
So glad you could make it. You recovered quickly.
Not so quickly. Took about 3 minutes.
We met walking, and so in honor of meeting Carl walking, I'm going to tell a story of a guy who takes a walk. And as he takes the walk, I want you to imagine yourself taking a walk too. And what I love about the story is I had no idea where it was going, but where it ended up was really worth the trip. So there's this author named Wendell Berry. He writes a lot of fiction about a rural part of Kentucky. And he's created characters, and he writes story after story, so if you read enough of them, you feel like they're real people. And this is a story about a farmer named Burley Coulter. He's in his 50s, and they brought their harvest in. By the way, I know nothing about farming, so I'm assuming this is what happens. They had put their crops out, they harvested them, they went to market and sold it, and now it's all done, and he's at home late in the evening, and he's got nothing to do, and he loves to hunt. He's got these two hunting dogs, and they go out at night, and he's walking this area that he knows really well. He spent his whole life there, and as he's walking, he's thinking. And it's quiet, but he's thinking, he's reflecting, he's seeing things that remind him, because he's lived there for 50-some years. It's not, what happened yesterday, but this long time of things that he's thinking about. And I'm going to keep some notes here because I don't want to miss all the good thing that's in here. So he goes out hunting with his dogs, and because it's a place he's familiar with, many of the places he passes have names. So he passes the Stepstone Hollow, the Katy Branch, the Willow Run, the Merchant House. And so I'm walking with Burley, and I'm thinking about all this. Places that have names and how meaningful that can be. So when I was a kid growing up in California, I lived in the San Joaquin Valley, which is hotter than blazes in the summertime. But my dad worked in the summer at a YMCA camp in the mountains at 5,000 feet in the Sierra Nevadas. And when we'd get up to the place where we'd go down to the lake that we lived, it was called Happy Gap. You drive out of the valley, you get to Happy Gap, and you could look down and see the lake. We'd go down to Sequoia Lake. There was a lagoon, and then on the way to a waterfall, we'd pass a little place that my mom named Bubble Pool. I mean, maybe as big as this table, just a small pool, but when the water would come off the rock, it would make bubbles. And if somebody says to me, Bubble Pool right now, that's Thanksgiving. It's a place I don't know how many peanut butter sandwiches I had before the days when we had peanut allergies. Do you have places in your life that are named, and just the naming of it brings back Thanksgiving? Think about that. Burley's walking. He's walking by the Stepstone Hollow, the Katy Branch, and his dogs are with him, hunting dogs. Ashley, do you know what's a blue tick?
Oh, it's a hound.
I don't know hunting either, but I'm loving the story we're going. So he's got his two dogs, Frog, who's a blue tick, and Jet. And I guess when you're hunting, the dogs go off on their own and they're trying to find the coons or whatever it would be. He's going to get some pelts, and he's going to take the pelts back, and he makes a little extra money doing that. So the dogs out running. I was scared of dogs as a kid. But I will never forget in 4th grade when our teacher gave us a book to read called Where the Red Fern Grows. And I'm sitting on my bed when I finished that book, and I'm in a puddle of tears. And then about 25, 30 years later, I open my son's bedroom door. He's in 4th grade.
Oh, no.
He's in a puddle of tears, and what book is open in front of him? Where the Red Fern Grows.
Yeah.
Do dogs and pets and the relationship and the companionship, do they bring some little memories of Thanksgiving? And Ashley, you have about an hour you can talk about that.
Like 8. Yeah.
So you know, if you think about taking a walk and thinking places that are named, maybe your dogs and your pets, these things are all going on in his mind as he's out walking. The dogs tree whatever they're chasing, whether, I don't know exactly what it was, but they tree the dog on a place called the Proudfoot place, which was a place that belonged to the Proudfoots. And listen to how he describes the Proudfoot place. If you think about Thanksgiving, Toll Proudfoot and his wife Minnie had passed their years together at the Proudfoot place. Toll was a good farmer. He'd been dead 5 years. And his 98 acres, more or less, had begun to be run down. And then just last summer, Miss Minnie, too, had passed away from the world. And now they never had children, so their heirs were kind of watching over the place, but not so much. Not just places, but remembering people. The Proudfoots. Do you have people in your life that when they say their names, all of a sudden you're starting to have some Thanksgiving? Well, he stops there at their house, and it's 19. Did I tell you this is 1948? Yeah. So it's 1948 is when the story. And he pumps some cold water and takes a drink of cold water after being out walking late at night. Have you ever had a drink of cold water that when you drank it, you were like, thank you. I mean, it was just perfect, and it tasted so good. Well, Anita, I didn't know you'd be here, but Miss Minnie was Burley's teacher for 8 years. He went to school in a one-room schoolhouse with the same teacher for 8 years. And so he starts thinking about the woman at the Proudfoot place named Miss Minnie. And he said that you might say we were philosophically opposed. Miss Minnie believed that learning was desirable, and she thought students should love to learn. Burley says, on the contrary, I believed in not learning a speck of anything until I absolutely had to. And she taught me my numbers and my letters. She taught me about syllables. She taught me to read words one by one and then whole pages. And I didn't learn one of those things because I wanted to. I learned them because she taught them to me over and over again until finally I just knew them. And that was the way it went for 8 long years, which I think I only had 8 good days in those 8 long years. The last day of school every year.
Anita can relate to that too.
But he says, so now Miss Minnie's dead. This is long after that. By her persistence and her undiscouraged belief in the possibility of human improvement and the goodness in every heart, she had taught him a good deal that he was unwilling to learn. And he still remembers all she taught him. And now, as she had often prophesied, he is grateful. You're going to thank me for this someday. How many teachers have said that? You're going to thank me for this someday. And after their long struggle was over, and I like this a lot because kids grow up and maybe know teachers in a different way. After the long struggle, she found the grace to continue to be nice to him. And he found out that he actually liked her as the years went by. And he started to look for ways that he could be kind to her. He's walking, he's thinking. There's places that are named, there's people that are named, he comes across a place that for some reason reminds him of the woman that he loves. Boy, part of Thanksgiving are the people that we love, and if it's a person that you've given your heart to in that special way, and so he's thinking of Kate Helen Branch, and he was in love, and he says that she made him say so. She said, "Do you love me, Burley Coulter?" He said, "Well, hell yes, of course I do." "Then why don't you tell me so?" "Well, Kate Helen, I love you. How does that suit you?" And she says, "Just fine." Thanksgiving is people that we can say, "I love you." And when you say it, it's just fine. It just feels real good. He's out looking for pelts, and the pelts are going to give him some extra income. And I don't know anything about this, but he's reminded of a story of a guy who had an extra smart hunting dog. And whenever he wanted a pelt, he would show the dog a stretching board of whatever size pelt he needed. And he would understand this. Apparently, there's different size pelts, and so he'd show a board that he was going to stretch it to, and this is what the dog would do. He would go out with a possum or a raccoon whose hide fit that board exactly right. So everyone was envious of this hunting dog. Until one day the owner made the mistake of letting the dog into the kitchen, and the dog caught sight of his ironing board. The little dog took a careful look, tore out for the woods, and nobody ever saw hide nor hair of him again. So he's remembering his funny stories. Isn't part of Thanksgiving the funny stories that we have in life and the things that make us laugh? I went to a fundraiser the other day for we support so many groups that I get to go to the fundraiser. Well, the auctioneer was a man who wasn't trained as an auctioneer, he was an actor. And so the first item that comes up is a visit to a wine cellar in River Oaks, donated by Lenore, who I have no idea who Lenore is. But he begins, as good auctioneer does, touting it up that, Lenore, she's got this wonderful wine cellar. It's in River Oaks. It's the best wines, and she's sacrificed all of this, and nobody's bidding. And finally, a woman in the front looks at him and goes, "Lenore is a man." The auctioneer kind of does a double take. And then he keeps going, and he's trying to dig himself out of a hole. And finally, this stern-looking man who was a Western thing, got on a cowboy hat. The man goes, $500. And he goes, "Thank you, sir." He goes, "By the way, what is your name?" And he goes, "Lenore." The poor auctioneer, he was good-spirited. We laughed and we laughed and we laughed. And where would we be without laughter? Do you have some funny stories in your life? And you don't tell them once. You tell them over. Carl and I, how many times have we told about meeting each other on the trail?
It's a good story. It's a great story.
And Wayne, it's floated around the church too. That's how we're known. "Oh yeah, you're the one."
And Nancy says that. Oh yeah. By the way, there's only been three. Wayne is the third preacher
In
at Pines.
53 years.
In Pines Presbyterian. It was opened in 1960. And I'm thankful for that there's a continuity and not all of the movement. And I know that's been a real blessing to the church to have you there.
Yeah, we've been there 20 years. You were reading the bio that I wrote when I first came. We're no longer raising our kids. They're 21, 24, 26, and 29. They made it off
Thank
the
goodness,
ground.
Wayne.
You always did.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're all self-support. Well. So Burley, and if you like these kind of stories, Wendell Berry, it's really, really something. At one point, Burley stops and he's thinking about his two nephews. Tom and Nathan, and they both went off to World War II. Yesterday was Veterans Day. And there's a tremendous amount of Thanksgiving, isn't there? But it's also a Thanksgiving that comes with the recognition of loss and things. He says the boys that he really worried about were his nephews, Tom and Nathan, and he worried about them when they were in war. I've never had a family member serve in a war, but I could just imagine the worry that you have when a loved one is at war. He had worried about Tom and Nathan when they were in war, and he had worried about Tom until Tom was killed in action, which is a bad way to stop worrying about somebody. And then he worried about Nathan until the war ended and Nathan came home, and then he kept worrying about him. It's not easy coming home after you've been a soldier. Somebody was looking at the little house that's right out here. It's the Interfaith Samaritan Christian Counseling Center. And one of the things that they're doing right now is they're counseling with the young men and women who come back from war, trying to help them re-enter the world. But, just the terrible, terrible struggles that people go through. So he says, I didn't stop worrying about Nathan when he came home. He came home and he went right to work as if there had been no interruption. When he wasn't at work, it appeared like he couldn't come to rest. He couldn't find a place to stop. You probably got a lot in your mind that you're working through. And it says he was god-awful quiet about whatever had happened to him. He was like his daddy. He never had much to say, but if you couldn't get him to say a peep about the war, you'd say, I reckon it got pretty bad over yonder, and he'd say, yep. And then he's thinking about these and how Nathan's starting to make a new beginning, and as he's thinking about his nephews, he just says, well, bless them all. Bless them all. He's thankful. It's not easy, but bless them all. Here's how the story comes to an end. And it caught me by surprise. That's why I love it so much. So he's been out walking late at night. The dogs are getting, some animals. He's got a few pelts in his thing. And he comes upon a barn, and he decides he's going to spend the rest of the night in the barn. He lights a fire outside, and he gets warmed up a little bit. And then he goes inside the barn and has another drink of cold water. And he had brought with him 6 biscuits. And he has a drink of cold water and these 6 biscuits. But they're biscuits that he learned how to make from his mama, who learned how to make from her mama, who learned how from her mama. And so when is a biscuit not a biscuit? It's got all this connection. And I was thinking, when our kids were little, we did a lot of baseball games and just wasn't enough time for dinner. So we'd get a big loaf of French bread and some salami. And that's all we'd have for dinner. We'd just kind of tear it up and give everybody that. Well, we went on vacation with all of our kids this summer, and we're in Hawaii, and we cooked out. We cooked steaks one night, and we went to some restaurants. And about the 4th night into it, we're driving home, and I'm trying to think what's for dinner. And the kids go, let's get some salami and a big loaf of French bread. And I was like, they connected that with something really special. So he sits down. He's got his cold water and his biscuits. And this is what he says about the barn. He says it's a feed barn. It's an old one that's well kept up. There's a hayloft, a small corn crib, 4 horse stalls, and a large pen for feeding cattle. Everywhere are the signs and traces of a good farmer. Somebody who knows what he's doing and likes doing it. And I was thinking, I wonder if he's really trying to tell us something about more than a good farmer who knows what he's doing and likes doing it. Do you ever get to the place where you just think about your life, your dogs, the named places, the people, the losses, and you say, not so much that there's a good farmer, but there's a good God. He knows what he's doing, and he likes it. Not that everything's perfect. If our Thanksgiving's going to be because everything's perfect, good luck. But in all of it, there's somebody watching over us. He knows what he's doing. He enjoys it. He takes pleasure in us. And then, kind of like a 2x4, at least to a preacher, there's a little thing there that the cattle come to feed it from. And it's a manger. And it's big enough for him, so he climbs in and he goes to sleep in the manger. God climbed into a manger once, and stayed with us. Emmanuel means God is with us. Have a great Thanksgiving.